Nakisha Adams, welcome to the Catalyst Podcast. Before we dive into this, I just want to share with the listeners here kind of the story of how we got to know each other. And it's just one of those random networking stories where you and I both know a gentleman by the name of Roy. And through another individual that I know in the Milwaukee area pretty well, I got to know Roy. And Roy and I were talking, I was telling him about how my wife is going to start up a niche book bar, Black-owned business here in town, and he immediately thought of you as one of those individuals that not only for my sake I need to connect with for the Milwaukee area, but for my wife. And so for the people at home, just to kind of get an idea, I talked to Nakisha for what was that, like all of like 10 minutes. And then I was just like, I think I want to have you on the podcast because what Nakisha has to offer here in terms of her story, I think is something that a lot of people can take value from and learn a lot of lessons from. So Nakisha, welcome to the Catalyst Podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So I guess we'll go the easy route to start us off. And so just tell us about Nakisha. Who is Nakisha Adams? Where are you from? What do you do? And what makes you tick?
Okay, well, Nakisha Adams is born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I come from a family of three, including myself, so altogether three girls. Dad was a attorney for the state of Wisconsin, mom's in management. So life has been pretty much like on a straightforward path of, what I should be doing. It's high school, college, career. And so things were pretty much laid out. I like to say I'm an open book. What you see is pretty much what you get. I am definitely a social butterfly now. I could not say that earlier in life because I just wanted to be to myself and just kind of focus and get things done. So needless to say, group projects and things like that in school were my forte. But yeah, right now I run a company, a nonprofit consulting company called Skribble Inc. And I'm very, very proud of it. And I could not have guessed in a million years. One of the things you said about our meeting is it was random. That's the best way I can describe, kind of stepping into entrepreneurship. It was very random. But I mean, here we are almost 2 years in, and I'm so happy of the work that we've done. And, I have much more planned for the company and for myself.
So when you mentioned Skribble, that was where I really found a lot of intrigue in you and your story, and that's where I really want to take this to, because for the folks at home, like Nakisha mentioned, I mean that's about 2 years that Skribble's been going on, but your background story that led you there is quite the interesting story, and I really want to share that. But before we dive in and kind of get into your story, what makes you tick, what habits do you utilize, inspiration that you utilize, things to that effect. I want to kind of give folks an idea of what you define success as, and then as you explain your story, I'm sure there'll be a lot of parts that overlap between your definition of success, your story, and where you're going. So how would you define success in your life?
Well, it used to be defined for me as achieving the ultimate career goal, being financially stable and creating a life for my children that was like the life I have. A lot of people always say you want to give your kids what you didn't have. Well, I wanted to give my kids what I did have and afford them the same opportunity. So that's what I used to measure success to be. And once I got into entrepreneurship, now success looks a little bit different to me. Success means that I attempted something. Even if this had not been successful, I was successful in branching out of my comfort zone and attempting something that I would not have ever thought I would have been able to do. Success for me was creating something that's helping individuals. Success to me is, seeing my clients reach something for the first time that they did not think was attainable. So success for me looks a little bit different now, especially since my work is in the nonprofit sector. And so at the end of the day, I know that I'm successful because I've created something that people are able to utilize. I'm helping individuals who are helping other individuals. And I'm getting to see nonprofits really carry out their mission and know that I was able to be behind that. So
Yeah. And something that really stood out to me when you kind of did your homework for me before the podcast was doing it in a way that demonstrates integrity, respect. What other notes did I have? Trust and honesty. So it's not just achieving success, right? Because I think there's a lot of people that do achieve success and they cut corners, they find ways to cut corners, whatever that might look like. But it really does seem to me, just by the little bit I've gotten to know you and reading your story, that that's a huge piece of what success means to you. Because I think that that does get lost. I'm sure that you can reflect on individuals that you've known that have achieved success. Myself, that um, you either did or were looking to cut corners, and I think I can say it too that I've been guilty of looking for where's the easy street to find it. But I think ultimately you've learned just from the little bit I've talked to you that that's not what you want success to be. You want it to be that hard work, that determination, and faith in the process. That's another piece. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about. The concept of faith has been very much a theme in everything I've learned about you and what you gave me prior to this. But yeah, it's really cool to see how your idea of success is so driven for the good of others and doing it on your own way, and doing it the right way. So
and it's important to me, when I'm working with clients, I tell them they have to be very transparent with me. They can't leave stuff under the table. So for them to give me that, I have to be able to give that in return. When you're dealing with nonprofits, especially in grant writing, grant writing is not an easy process, and it's not something that happens instantaneously. So having clients trust me in that process and me kind of take them along the way to really do things right from beginning to end, you have to have some type of integrity about you. You have to be honest and forthright. And, like I tell my clients, I could easily recommend them for grants that I know that they won't have a chance in hell of getting. But what would it do for them at the end of the day, and what would it be for me? Because at the end of the day, my name's attached to this,
yeah,
and I'm building something that's going to leave a legacy behind. So I want to make sure I am giving the best information and giving them information that is truthful. And I'm being very honest and straightforward with them.
yeah, and I think what stood out to me with that too is just like the idea of efficiency, right? You just talked about how you could have clients, you could recommend them for grants, and I guess before we go and talk too much about Skribble, we'll dive into what is Skribble all about through and through, because I really think as after looking at it for a while, it's really an amazing concept that you've developed and put into practice. Um, but being able to be so efficient, right? And I think there's other parts to your story that speak to how you see things, from how can I be effective, efficient, not wasting resources, and I think ultimately too, it's you're not wasting time. That's a another big theme that stands out to me, and I think that's something admirable, because when you think about how quickly Skribble has developed in 2 years, it's clear that that idea of efficiency is core, and it's not just efficiency by any standard. It's efficiency through trust, integrity, honesty, and being just in what you're doing. So I love a lot of the themes that I see around your story and what you're looking to do.
And also, when you're dealing with nonprofits, as you know, they don't necessarily have a lot of money to invest in certain things. So they do want to make sure that the money they are spending is being spent wisely. And that's something that I also look at when I'm dealing with clients. If you're going to pay for a specific service, I want to make sure you're getting that service that you're paying for, and that I truly believe that this is meant for you. And it's not something that's wasting your time, and it's not something that's wasting my time to create, dollars at the end of the day on my end. So
Yeah. And I think one thing that stands out, so just a little teaser for the listeners, I'm really excited to talk about how you took a 5-year plan and basically finished it up in a year. That I'm excited to, well, I want to tease out what made that happen, because anyone to say a 5-year plan happens in a year, like obviously there's something being done and done well in order to achieve that. So so before we kind of tease into all those different ideas that really surround Skribble, what you've built and where you're going, I think this is a good point to turn to what is Skribble, and then kind of telling, give us the overview and some of those details. I think this is a perfect time to brag about what you've built. And then I want to dive into how did you get there? So overview, Skribble, and then the story. So what do you got for us there?
So Skribble is a nonprofit consulting company, as I mentioned, and it's really a one-stop shop. It's where nonprofits can come to find out about ways to develop and grow their nonprofit. So we help with strategic planning, we help with board development, we help with board onboarding, we help with grant writing. So it's all the pieces that are necessary to make a nonprofit successful. We also help individuals who are looking to start nonprofit and walking them from the beginning to the end, because a lot of people may not know Wisconsin is one of the states that is #1 as far as when it comes to nonprofits. And there are a lot of individuals that have nonprofits, but they're not true nonprofits, meaning they don't have that paperwork that backs them as a nonprofit. So you'll usually see that they rely a lot on private donations or fundraising because they can't go after the grant writing piece because they don't have that letter from the IRS that says, hey, you are a 501c3. And a lot of people don't know how to go about doing that, or they don't have the funds to necessarily invest into getting things done the right way. So, we consult with individuals and say, hey, if you're looking to do it the right way, this is the steps that you're going to take. This is what's going to cost. And they may, step away and come back a couple of months and say, hey, I now have the money. I want to do things the right way. It might be something that they say, you know what, let's do it. Let's get it done. We want to start the process. But yeah, for the most part, I would say 50% of what we do is the grant writing, and then the strategic planning, the board development, all falls into those pieces as well. And we work with, again, small nonprofits to large nonprofits. As far as Skribble, how we started, and again, this is that randomness. As I mentioned before, I was working in corporate America. So my background is finance and law, and I don't know why, but I went back to school to pursue a third degree. And while pursuing that degree, I came to the point where I was almost finished with my program and needed 3 more credits and needed an elective. So I'm looking through all the classes to see what could kind of fit into the time I had already set aside for classes within my schedule. And I came across a grant writing class and I'm reading up on it. I'm like, well, this looks interesting. This should be pretty easy. I like to write. It's no brainer. I can get my credits and be on my way. And as I went through the class, it was really interesting. The teacher gave me really good feedback, but again, I was not thinking in a million years that this was something I was going to utilize after school was done. I, just wanted my credits so I could go back into corporate America and just finish what I was trying to pursue. So fast forward, I'm at a networking event that one of my friends had put together. And he pulls me to the side and introduces me to another one of his friends who happened to be looking for a grant writer. And I kind of laughed because I'm like, well, I'm not a grant writer. I took a grant writing class, but I'm by no means a grant writer. And he's like, well, you have your background in finance and law. They really need help. They've been going through the state to try to get this grant for the past 2 years. They've been unsuccessful. His friend didn't really have any money to invest towards a grant writer and just really wanted someone who could be a second set of eyes, read through what they've been submitting and kind of see if anything jumped out that, would have prevented them from pursuing this grant. So I agreed to look it over, when it came to the wording, the language, look at the budget to see if there was anything that stood up. And as I'm reading it, I'm taking things out of it, I'm adding things, and, pretty much rewrote their whole proposal. We submitted it, fingers crossed. I didn't think about it, kind of put it out of sight, out of mind, because the deadline was still a month away. I went on about life. And then I get this phone call on my cell phone. And me, if you're like most people, I don't like answering numbers I don't recognize. So I'm the type of person, I'm at the age where if it's important, I'll leave a message. So the number didn't leave a message, but they called right back. And I noticed it was a Madison number. I said, okay, well, I should probably take this. So I answered the phone, and it was the Department of Veteran Affairs. And they were actually trying to reach one of the individuals who I submitted the grant for. And I told them that this was my number, but I was the person that wrote the grant. And she was like, well, we're trying to get in touch with them because, we want to award this grant to them. She was like, you must be a pretty good grant writer because, you know, we accepted the proposal and they're going to get this $25,000. So I'm trying to reach, you know, one of them to get them on the phone, like, hey, Madison's trying to reach you. They need to send you some paperwork. They need your signature. So by the time I get a hold of them, they're thrilled, you know, they're happy, ecstatic. And, you know, after that, I was like, okay, well, that's the end of that. And then I started receiving emails from them with other people included on the email saying, hey, this is Nakisha. She helped us with our grant. Maybe she can be of help to you. And before I knew it, I was juggling my corporate America career and grant writing. And so it got to a point where I really had to make a decision. Do I step aside from grant writing and just focus on my corporate America job, or do I step away from corporate America and do the grant writing? Because I could no longer do both. I couldn't work 8, 9, 10 hours a day in my, you know, 9 to 5 and then come home and try to work 3, 4 hours, you know, to make sure somebody's grant was really where it needed to be before it was ready to be submitted. So I prayed on it, talked to my significant other, and literally stepped out on faith and was like, I am going to pursue this. And one of the reasons that I decided to pursue it was because there was a need. I saw that there was very much of a need, not just for, you know, women of color, but women, period, when it came to grant writing. You know, I was speaking to a lot of nonprofits that were minority led, and there was a disconnect between the nonprofit and the grant writer that they were using, which is, you know, not uncommon, because sometimes when you have people writing your story and they're not able to relate to your story, you know, they're not able to present it necessarily from a mission point, but they're more presenting it from a money point, which doesn't always grab the attention of the person on the other side of the table. So based upon the people that I was working with and the network that I had built up from corporate America, I did have a strong support system behind me going into this. And clients were ready. They were like, yes, finally, you're gonna do this. And kind of to lead to what you asked about taking that 1 year, that 5-year plan and doing it in one, that was, I truly believe it was because this was something I was meant to do. And people say that when you're good at something, other people are gonna want it. So by networking, LinkedIn, word of mouth, you know, Skribble grew. It grew beyond anything I could have imagined within the 1 year. My 5-year plan was to have Skribble in 5 states. You know, I don't want to say I was thinking small, but I was trying to be realistic. You know, I had a footprint in Wisconsin, but, you know, by the next year, I wanted to have a major footprint, you know, in Illinois. And by the next year, I wanted to have a major footprint in Georgia. And within 1 year, we're in 9 states and 1 country, you know. So I had the opportunity to go to Haiti, you know, and actually see a client's work firsthand of what they were trying to do, you know, and being able to, you know, have magazines in Georgia reach out to me and say, hey, can we get an interview about Skribble? Because, you know, we're hearing about the good things you're doing and we want, you know, people, our readers, to know what you're doing. So like I said, I have to now think of a new 5-year plan because my 5-year plan was done in one, and I couldn't ask for anything more. And, you know, like my significant other told me, because I was nervous. I'm like, well, how am I going to, you know, interact and run, you know, all these components in other states? You know, I can't be all these places at once. And he's like, when you have something someone wants, they won't mind if you talk to them via email, if it's, you know, via Zoom, as long as you're able to deliver the product that they're looking for. And when it comes to what we're doing, you know, clients don't mind being led a consultation on Zoom. Clients don't mind emailing me over a grant application or a grant packet and having me look over it and say yay or nay. Clients don't mind as long as they know that they're getting this product at the end of the day. And because a lot of people have been able to say, hey, this has worked for us, this is what she's done for us, and they're able to see it, they don't mind that I may be in Wisconsin or I may be in Georgia and they're in New York or they're in Florida, because they want the bottom line. So
Yeah. There's so many things out of your story that I have written down that I'm going to try to tease out of this thing. Couple of points just as I was sitting here listening, to the point of like nonprofits, right? When you think about the need that they have. I mean, I've been working in nonprofits now, getting close to a decade, and resources are hard to come by. Especially, I work for the Boys and Girls Clubs. And so we try to put as much as we can into operations. You know, we really don't want to have overhead with marketing and too much on resource development work. And you know, I've met some really, really great resource development folks as I've gone through the job. And sometimes though it's hard because like you said, it can sometimes turn into writing about the money, not necessarily like mission and how mission does, you know, deserves that money. And this is how we're doing it. And so I think what you did, you know, just to tease one thing out, was your ability to utilize a skill set. And I guess there's going to be some other questions that tie in, but a skill set that you already had, right? So you have finance, legal. So you have a really, really solid foundation to really support others, especially nonprofits, from a how do you set yourself up? How do you protect yourself? How do you ensure the longevity of this organization through that legal type of foundation? And then the finance, how do we help ensure that we can secure funding for your organization? So I guess we'll just dive into that first idea that I'm thinking of is how it was really amazing to hear your story, how you came from a background that was not nonprofit, you know, especially starting a nonprofit and then running a nonprofit. So a couple questions there would be, one, what was your experience in nonprofit world prior to you starting your own nonprofit? And then two, how did you, if you were to break it down, how would you describe that process of basically taking one skill set, you know, this corporate skill set, this legal finance background, and then tying it in with whatever experience you had and or what you learned with nonprofits? Because you're talking about, you know, basically you're jumping off a bridge to a whole new world that you haven't really explored. So what do you think about all that?
Okay, well, to your first question, my experience prior to starting my own company to deal with nonprofits, working in the nonprofit sector actually came from a number of boards that I was sitting on and still currently sit on right now. So with me, when it comes to boards, I'm very picky about the invitations I accept because I firsthand know time is involved. So I always want to make sure that I'm able to give of myself what is being required. Second of all, I want to make sure that it's a mission that I'm very passionate about. So sitting on these boards really gave me a chance to serve with organizations that have a mission that I'm very passionate about, either because I have someone close to me that is able to utilize these services that organization is providing, or because I just know the work of the organization and how beneficial it is to so many people. So again, being able to sit on these boards, being able to volunteer and serve on these committees gave me my background to the nonprofit sector. And then secondly, as far as, well, I'm sorry, what was the second point that you asked me?
Yeah, sorry, I packed a lot into that one. So the second one kind of ties into this idea of you know, you went from
Oh,
one neighborhood
yeah,
basically to another, right?
jumping off the cliff. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, I mean, one of the things when doing this business is deadlines, timelines. Being in corporate America, you know, things are due, reports are due, you know, I'm reporting to different individuals, making sure they have the information that they need, you know, investigations, you know, making sure my investigations are completed. You know, I was working with a number of different agencies. So I was working with the Milwaukee Police Department, you know, I'm working with different, you know, owners of homes. I'm working with, you know, the Milwaukee Housing Authority, and I'm working with, you know, different judges and, you know, parole officers. So making sure that all those people had the information they need so that they could do work on their end and get things back to me so that I could close out cases. So, you know, taking that over to, you know, what I'm doing now, as you know, grant writing requires deadlines. You know, you have to make sure that all the information that the funder is requesting you're providing, not just the proposal, but, maybe it's a list of the board of directors, it's a project budget, it's an organizational budget, it may be letters of support. So there are certain things that I have to make sure my client is aware of so they can provide that information so that I can make sure everything's gonna go and be handed in on time. Because, I mean, for me to write the grant, that's fine. But if there's not certain information that's included with that grant, then it was a waste of time. So really just making sure that when the client gives me the information, that they're aware of certain things that are required from them and that they're going to be able to meet their deadlines or help me help them. So that was one piece of it. Time management. Now I'm dealing with multiple clients. So I have to make sure that the caseload, so to speak, of everything that we're taking on, it's manageable. I don't want to take on something and have to go back to a client and say, hey, I thought I was going to be able to do this, but I can't. That would not be a good look for myself. And of course, it's going to put the client in a bind, especially if it's something that they were really hoping that they were going to, be able to go after. So, understanding that, that comes from corporate America because, in the department that I worked with, someone's out sick, you're now taking on their caseload. So you still have to make sure that those cases get completed. And then I would say, being organized, that has to come with it because, I could be writing a grant over here for domestic violence survivors and turn around and be, leading a whole consultation about board revampment and making sure PowerPoints are put together. And then turn around, I'm over here advocating for children's services. So you have to be very organized because I don't want to, of course, mix up clients and mix up their timelines and their deadlines. So I would say, all of that help. And then the analytics, understanding budgets and understanding different components of, what a grant application requires, understanding the abstract, understanding, the mission statement, understanding the story itself, the different matrix, that are used to make sure that, the program inputs and outputs, are being met, that the funder is going to request to make sure that, hey, you guys said that you were going to meet these certain numbers. How did you do? So, being able to put all that together, corporate America really helped with that. But also, again, the networking portion of it. I met a lot of people while I was in corporate America, and I still have a lot of those relationships and being able to bring those relationships over to what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, that's just, it's an amazing story to hear, especially someone like you, where you're in what seemed to be a very, very, secure position. You've been doing it probably for some time and doing it well. And then, you just see this opportunity and you jump, right? And I think what stands out to me as I listen to you talk about that, how do you go from one area to another, for profit to, corporate to nonprofit. But when you tease it out, right, you kind of describe some like time management, organization, networking, people skills, communications. I guess what I'm teasing out, which seems to be the common theme in a lot of the conversations I have, is nothing is overly complex, right? It's the basics. It's the basics and focusing on the basics and trying to do the basics at the highest level you can, within reason, right? Like you mentioned, like you don't want to get yourself into a place where obviously you're good at what you do. Skribble is growing; it's growing quickly. You've had a lot of success, so what you offer is worth people's time. But you know that you can't offer too much, right? You have so much capacity. So what's interesting to me is your success really is, I can tie it back to, you do the basics at a very high level, but then you can look at, I tell my team this at the Boys and Girls Club, people I meet, a lot of times when you study success and you think about especially athletes, if you could probably pick out any of the top athletes ever in basketball, I always think about like Michael Jordan, talking about how many free throws he would shoot, or Steph Curry, how often he would work on his 3-point shot. Or if any sport, Aaron Rodgers, probably, for me as a big Packer fan, how much does he practice his footwork and just practicing cadences and studying the playbook? It's their efficiency of getting to be the best at the basics is what allows any great athlete, business person, anyone, I think, in any sector of our society. Success always seems to be those folks that have a really, really good grasp of the basics, what they are, why they're important, and then practicing them. And so, just from hearing what you said, I think it's a valuable point for folks to listen to. So, I got a couple ideas where I want to go with. I definitely want to get into the leap of faith. I think that is something that has a lot of value, but I also want to kind of talk a little bit about the basics a little bit too. So trying to think, let's talk a little bit about the basics. I think the leap of faith ties into some other concepts that'll take us down a different road. So I think there was a list of lessons learned that you kind of described in your one pager. And I'm just going to kind of list them off. Now I know the leap of faith kind of was in there, but we're going to hold that off here kind of towards the end because like I said, I love this idea of taking that leap of faith and doing something you're not sure about. So some of the concepts you talked about in the document you gave me were learning to say no, focusing on what you can win, celebrating the process, trusting yourself, having value in yourself, understanding plans don't always go as you plan. There was one section you talked about, like when you step into the unknown, you start to realize what is possible, and then the idea of networking. So I know I just listed off like 8 things. When I go through that list, and I can pick at any pieces that we might miss in discussion. What are some of those lessons that you learned? How did you learn them? Why are they so valuable to you? And what do you think people can take from these lessons? And you can pick at any of those, and I can bring them up as we go through them.
So those lessons really came from a question someone asked me after I celebrated my 1-year anniversary of Skribble. They said, so what did you learn your first year of being an entrepreneur? So, one of the things that was really important that I really hope that people understand is when they think entrepreneur, they think you're your own boss, you call your own shots. And that's true to a certain extent, but also sometimes your clock doesn't shut off. If there's a deadline, I found myself up to, 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes working on proposals. I've also made the mistake sometimes of being up in the middle of the night and responding to emails, and clients like, oh, you're up. So now we have a conversation going on at 3 o'clock in the morning, especially when you have clients in different time zones. But one of the things that I took away most importantly, after my first year was, we get so caught up in setting our eyes on the end goal that we forget to celebrate the little things along the way. So, for me, I was so caught up in, I wanted to finish that first year off good, but, there were little accomplishments along the way that, I had to stop and say, hey, I achieved something. This is huge. This is cause for celebration. So I didn't want to have tunnel vision and just focusing on, hey, this 1-year plan, this 5-year plan, and I forgot about the little things along the way that, I was able to say, hey, I did this. Another thing that I learned was, learning to say no. A lot of times, you want to take on so many things because you want to prove that you can do it, especially when you're in your first year of business. You're kind of looking at the big picture, but you also have to know your limitations. There's a difference between quality and quantity. I could just do grants, but are they going to be quality grants? So I really want to make sure that the grants that people are paying me for, that I'm really putting my all into them, and I'm not just doing it to get them done because there's another one that I want to, get money for. So, that's another important lesson. Another thing to me that I learned during that first year was, you can't be afraid to put a price on your work. People have to respect your time, but don't be afraid to put a price on that time. Don't shortchange yourself. Don't cheat yourself, because, grant writing is hard. It's not like, I'm mass producing things. This is something I'm thinking about. I'm researching, because I don't know everything there is to know about domestic violence. I don't know everything there is to learn, about criminal justice reform. I don't know everything that there is to know about, prenatal care for, certain populations. So when clients approach me, one of the things I have to do, I have to research them. I have to look at their organization. I have to see their accomplishments. I have to look at their history. And it causes me to have to look, and do research on other organizations similar to theirs. So I can really get a feel on what the direction I want to go as far as being able to write their grant. One thing about me is I'm an avid reader. I love to read because reading allows me to get lost in character stories. It allows me to kind of, transport to that particular time and place and just really understand what the character goes through. And that's how I take on grant writing. When I meet a client, I again research them, and I want to get lost in their story. I want to feel like their mission is really important to me. I want to feel like, man, like this is powerful. Like this has to keep going. That they need the funding for this. Like by any means necessary, I have to get that. I want that feeling. So I have to make sure that I immerse myself in what they're doing. Trying to remember some of the other points on that list, because like you said, there were about 8 of them. What else was on that list?
So we have, so we went through learn to say no. We went through kind of focusing on what you can win, celebrating the process. So the other points were like trust in yourself. Plans don't always go as as planned.
Yeah.
And say we'll start with those two.
Yeah, of course. We can plan and we can say, hey, this is how I'm going to execute it. This is how I'm going to do it. But sometimes there's a monkey wrench on those plans, and you have to be okay with it. You have to be able to say, okay, this happened. How do we get through this? And to be able to take a step back, refocus. There's been times when I've been writing a grant and I happen to look on the funder's website and the deadline has been moved up. Or, they after the webinar and going through a Q&A process with, other prospective grantees, they say, what, we've gotten a lot of questions about this, so we're omitting this section from the grant. So, things like that, being able to, hey, okay, this didn't go as according to plan. Maybe I already wrote this section and now they don't want it. Or maybe I didn't think to include this section and now they're asking for it. Or, hey, I thought we had another week. They've now, shortened that by 4 days. So, understanding that things don't go according to plan and being able to readjust, not break down, and just continue and get it done. So.
Yeah, and I think that's something where I focus on a lot in my own work with my own team, especially working with youth, right? Trying to teach these children that, hey, one, it's okay to fail to a degree, right? Like failure is how you learn. And so when your plan doesn't go accordingly to the point of failure, that's not a point that you can just just lie there on the ground and let life go past you. It's a moment where it's like, no, this is gonna happen, right? There's an individual I listen to a lot. He's a retired Navy SEAL, and I love his work, and he's done a lot of books and podcasts. But a quote I kind of think of to myself every day is, "Be aggressive, but be flexible." You want to have those goals in mind, whatever those might be. But you have to know that, like you said, there's going to be a curveball thrown at you. There's going to be that monkey wrench that happens, and you're going to get hit. I love I think it was Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face, right? And that's going to happen. And I think that's a really valuable element to your story. Like when I just read these, like I said, these cornerstone statements is kind of what I labeled them on my notes. I thought there was so much value, such significant value in these elements, because a lot of times I don't think one, I just have this general belief that I don't think people reflect enough on where they are, where they've been, where they want to go, and what are they using as what lessons have they learned, and what's that foundation of these cornerstone statements and values that they live by. And what I've learned from you in this short time is you have a really solid foundation in what you live by and how you see yourself and how you see your work, and I guess the point you come to where you're very happy with what you have. You're at peace with what you have. You want to achieve more. So obviously you're going to stay aggressive, but that's not to say you're not happy with where you're at though. And that's where I guess that's that idea for you, and maybe this is something that I see a lot and hear a lot, experience it myself, which is that idea of, you mentioned it before, celebrating success, but why is it you think so many people struggle to celebrate success and be content with where they're at in their process, even though their process isn't over?
I think a lot of people struggle with that because they focus on the what ifs. They focus on what if this doesn't go right. My thing is failure is a part of success. Because failure means that you attempted to do something, you executed it, but it just didn't pan out the way you foresee it. So that means you now get a chance to do it again, but maybe execute it differently. And I think people get so caught up on the failure piece of it that, again, that's a measure of their success. They set these goals for themselves, and if they don't achieve those goals, by a certain timeline into them, they failed. They didn't succeed, but not realizing that you set out to do something, and even though you didn't reach where you wanted to be, you reached part of it. So now you get to go back, look at it, and say, okay, how do I execute it differently to get to that level where I'm going to go? And that's what I talk about, not forgetting to celebrate those milestones along the way. If I just put my focus into, I'm going to achieve this by year one, I could have been devastated, if things didn't pan out and I didn't get to where I wanted to be year one, and I wouldn't have looked back and said, you know what, even though I didn't get to where I wanted to be by year one, I achieved this, in 3 months, I achieved this in 6 months, I achieved this at the 7-month mark. And those are things to be, feel good about. Those are things to be celebrated, because this is not something that I would have expected, if somebody had told me 2 years ago, this is what you're going to be doing. Yeah. So, the fact that you're able to step outside your comfort zone and do something that you never thought that you would be, that's success. That's something to be celebrated, because not a lot of people have the courage to step outside of that box and, do something that they had no plan for, or that they, did not think was possible. A lot of people are content, doing what they're doing because it's security there, but when you step out and you no longer have that safety net under you, yes, it's a nerve-wracking feeling. Yes, it's scary, but, how many people can say that? How many people can say, I had an idea, and even though it didn't go as I expected, I stepped out on faith, I took a chance, and here I am. You look at some of the greats, as they call them. You look at like the Bill Gates, or you look at the Jeff Bezos, Jeff, here he was working in corporate America, and he took a leap of faith to start this company. To him, it could have meant he failed because he was having to take out loans from his parents, or he's working out of a garage. But if he wouldn't have took that leap of faith, we wouldn't have an Amazon, or maybe we would have, and it would have been something started by somebody else in a totally different concept. But it's because he took a leap of faith. Look at Apple, Steve Jobs, it's all these people who were willing to step outside their comfort zones and take a leap of faith. You talked about earlier, about as far as the practice with athletes, and, them, athletes practice forever, trying to perfect a jump shot or trying to perfect a certain play, and they go out there and they have games where they're off, they miss a free throw, or they throw and it's intercepted. Does that mean their whole career up until that point now is a failure? No, you're going to have off days, but you have to be willing to say, yep, I went out here, I gave it my all. It didn't pan out to what I wanted the end result to be, but I have to celebrate the milestones along the way. Are we to say that Giannis's whole career was a failure because the Bucks didn't win a championship? No, he can look back and say, hey, we didn't think we were going to get this far in the playoffs, or hey, I didn't think I was gonna, reach this record, so you have to just remember to step back and look at things along the way and celebrate those moments. And again, just execute differently the next time.
Yeah. So we kind of dove in there to that idea of leap of faith, and that was probably I shouldn't say the one thing. There's many things that have stood out to me about your story, as I've said already, but that was probably like the top thing of how you went from secure job to, I don't know if I'm going to have a paycheck in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 months, who knows, right? So how, there's so many questions I want to ask, but what I go to is what pushed you over that ledge to be like, all right, let's go? And did it take some time? Was it difficult, or was it pretty easy for you?
It was definitely not easy, because again, when you're working in corporate America and you're making the money that you want to make, and you have a 401k, you have a pension, you know that check is going to come every 2 weeks through that direct deposit, unless something, happens where, God forbid, you're laid off, or the company, is bought out, and, you're now looking at severance packages or something like that. But, no, it wasn't easy. It was the most scariest thing ever. And then, having kids, you're like, of course they're relying on you to, do certain things. So my mind automatically went to, okay, if this doesn't work out, what's going to happen? What's my plan B? Am I going to have to go back to corporate America and say, hey, it didn't work out and back? Am I going to have to find a job in another sector? Am I going to have to find a job doing what I was doing, but hopefully at another company, and now having to learn everything all over again with them? So there were a million things going in my mind. Then I'm like, being an entrepreneurship, healthcare benefits. And so yes, it was one of the scariest things ever. Again, I was stepping out on faith, and stepping out that if I was going to do this, that, this is a plan God had for me, and he was going to take care of me.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question, is like, what gave you that comfort? And for you, so obviously it's a religious sense of faith, right?
Yes, definitely. Like I said, I prayed on it. I'm like, God, give me a sign. Am I doing the right thing? Am I making a right decision? Am I acting too hastily? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And I won't lie. I won't say, even though, you heard me say that I reached my 5-year plan in one, I'm not going to lie and say the first year was easy. There were definitely nights where I was like, what have I done? Did I do the right thing? I didn't sign up for this. There were nights where I worried, am I going to have enough clientele to sustain my income? How am I going to attract clientele? And, along the way, there was always a sense of, when I got that uneasy feeling, it was always another sense of comfort that came after it. Like, everything is going to be okay. Don't worry. So, I have to attribute part of that to my spirituality, because, I am a firm believer, in God, and I just, trusted the process. And also, I'm also a firm believer in karma. So I'm always, what you put out is what you're going to get. So I just, made sure that anything that I put out in the universe was the right type of energy. That's why, I wanted to make sure I did right by people. And I knew that if I did, that it was going to come back, and it was going to come back in a good way. And it did. People would post their experiences on social media about the company, which increased the likes on Skribble's page, which increased the traffic to the website. People were showing interest on LinkedIn, and I would get, hey, I saw your profile. This is what you do. Can we set up a meeting? So anytime, again, that I worried about the direction that Skribble was going to go, soon after, there was a sense of comfort that, I'm doing the right thing, just keep doing it. And then I was also looking on ways to improve the process, looking on ways to expand, looking on ways to okay, I do X, Y, and Z. Let me throw a W into the mix and see how, people react to it. So.
Yeah. So a lot of trial and error, just like you said, so trial and error, trusting the process, valuing the time you have, spending it on the right things, identifying when you're making, even the small successes along the way. It just seems like you have a really good formula for success, and having that faith, spiritually, right? I think like you mentioned, you have, that faith in God, that he's put a plan in place for you that is going to be successful. But then you also have that idea of karma, that, what you put out is what you're going to get back. And it's what I kind of tie that to is, and I think I think about ego a lot, and I talk about ego a lot, especially with my own team, and we kind of talk about how that has a balance in the equation. And what I'm hearing too is you have a really healthy ego, in that you bet on yourself. That I put that on my notes, and I put value in self. But and when I wrote that, I was thinking about, this is a woman who really will bet on herself, because she has faith that she's not put in a position to fail, and that really the only probably way you're gonna fail is if you like almost intentionally cause yourself to fail by not taking the steps that allow you to be successful, and or not just not doing doing right by the process. Would I have that? Does that sound like a pretty good snapshot of Nakisha?
Yes, yes, yes. And then
So,
one of the things that kind of goes along with that list that we were just talking about is, I also learned a valuable lesson. You can't do business with everyone, no matter the amount of money involved, because some people don't share the same values that you do. So that was another, hard lesson that I had to, realize during that first year of Skribble and venturing through the entrepreneurship journey. So.
well, a couple more things I want to dive into here. So the faith part, leaping into faith. You talked about in one of your cornerstone statements how when you step into the unknown, you start to realize what is actually possible, and that it's infinite. Can you kind of describe what that experience was like for you? Like how did you come to learn that lesson?
Part of the way I learned that lesson was, again, being able to have that 5-year plan in 1 year. I wouldn't have thought, staying in corporate America, and if I've never would have ventured out, that I would have had the opportunity to go to Haiti. I mean, Haiti wasn't on, of course, my bucket list, but, having the opportunity to go to a place like that and see somebody's mission firsthand, but also to see the people who rely on that mission, it does something for you. You can read stories online, you can see pictures, but actually seeing poverty firsthand, or, seeing the benefits of people having a certain service firsthand, it does something for you, and again, being able to step out that comfort zone that was my job over here in corporate America, and step out into entrepreneurship, that maybe not would have been one of the opportunities that I would have been afforded to myself. I mean, of course, we see poverty. We can drive past someone asking for money, or, serving on the boards, and doing the work with the nonprofits. You can see people who are receiving the services that you're advocating for. But, seeing that type of poverty, it was really like, wow, like this is kind of what I need to be doing. This is the work that I should be doing. And realizing that you have a skill and that you're providing a service that really is affecting millions of people.
Yeah. And that's amazing. And it's all just because you took one step forward, right? Like it didn't have to be this mammoth leap. It didn't even have to be, 100 steps. Just it's one step forward at a time, and you start to realize what A, you're capable of, and then B, like what the possibilities are through doing something that you can be passionate about. Right. And even though you took a step into the unknown, you just had faith that, hey, I'm utilizing a skill set and background that I already have. I'm just going to find a way to, take what I've learned and what's new and just make something of it. And you
Right.
never looked back.
Never looked back. And then just looking at the things that, I was able to accomplish, is kind of like, if I can accomplish this in this amount of time, just imagine what I can do in another 2 years or another 5 years. So no, didn't look back. It used to be, my significant other, when I first started Skribble, every 2 weeks he would ask me, do you miss corporate America? And I would say no. And then it went from him asking me every 2 weeks to, every 3 months. And then he just stopped asking because he could tell that, no matter what happened, I was focused on making this work.
So with the way you operate, I kind of want to dive into a couple of things that stuck out to me that you've said, some ideas that I thought about kind of on the side, and things that you gave. One of the things that really stood out to me was how you say that you are your own biggest critic. I want to ask you about that, and ask you what does that process look like for you, in your head, or whatever method you utilize to really evaluate yourself. Like, for example, for me, I have a whiteboard downstairs and I just do SWOT analysis. And I try to think about myself, right? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my opportunities to grow? And what are the threats in my life that could take me down, right? So that's like that's my process of being a self-critic, because when it's all up there, sometimes it gets a little messy. So for you, I'm curious, like, when you criticize yourself, right? How do you do it? And how do you do it in a way that is healthy and productive for where you are and where you want to go?
I have a journal, and it's kind of funny because the journal says plans for world domination. So I'm constantly writing notes to myself. And I'm very big on words of affirmation. So to me, I'm constantly, saying, I believe in speaking things to existence. So I'm constantly writing notes and words of affirmation, daily affirmations to myself. And while I'm focused on improving the process, I have to also remember to take time out to be thankful for the process. So even though I'm hard on myself, I don't want to be too hard on myself. But I always, before I submit a grant, I'll reread it and double read it and triple read it. And, even after it's sent off, I'm like, man, should I have added something differently? I'll go back and look at the grant once it's submitted, and I'm like, oh, should I have reworded that a different kind of way? Did I go for the right grant for this client at this specific time in their organization? If I give a presentation, after a presentation, I'm like, man, maybe I should have said that, or man, I forgot to say that, or I should have included that. And so it's those little checks and balances that I go through for myself. But I've learned to, also, again, take time out to say, you did a good job. Hey, that client came to you with that grant 5 days ago, and that deadline was, 3 days away, and you were able to get it pulled out, and it was something the client really loved. And, no matter how this pans out, you did the best that you could. So, it's just little things like that for me. I just, again, I have to continue to check just trust the process, and I can't overthink the process at the same time, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think the journaling, that's something that I know myself, I do every day. And you kind of hit on that idea of like what's happening, what do you want? And then I think you touched on that last piece, that gratitude piece, and just being thankful for what it is that you're doing. And I think a lot of times too, to that point of you want to reflect, but you don't want to be too harsh in your reflection. I think for me, I just came up with this new habit. I have a little habit tracker on my phone, and one of my newest habits is I just call it my scorecard. I read something about a week ago, and I think this might be another interesting way to look at it, think about it, is when you think about that person you want to be, what are those characteristics of that person? And so what I did, I came up with a list of about, I want to say it was like eight characteristics. And so now I look at that list every day and I say, where do I score on being that person or displaying that characteristic, whether that's, just being honest, or just being empathetic, whatever those pieces are, and then I'll grade myself. And it's what's nice is that I'm able to look at it objectively and say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how did I do? Did I do a 5 out of 5 today? Great. Did I do a 3 out of 5? So it's not that I'm reflecting too heavily in what happened today. It's like, okay, I scored at a 3. It's not where I want to be. So tomorrow, what can I do to do better? Right. So it's that healthy balance of, I'm being critical, but I'm not dwelling in what did I do today to achieve that low 3, but what can I do to improve tomorrow to move on. And I think when you think about your journaling and writing those affirmations and having these goals that you have in your strategic plan, and you have that reminder in your head to make sure that you're being grateful, and recognizing too that concept of, did you put your best foot forward? Because if you did, what really do you have to be worried about? And then that idea too, knowing success isn't always going to be achieved in the plan that you had. You're not always going to achieve. Sometimes you might actually full out fail. But being able to reflect on, did I make a move that was reasonable? Did I put my best foot forward? And I think when you make that a habit of putting yourself into winnable situations, putting yourself into a schedule that isn't compromising to yourself and your goals that you want, you start to you hit a lot of success. But you remind yourself that that's not always guaranteed. And I think that's what I've learned in your stories, that you have a really healthy balance. Everything from your self-criticisms to the way that you objectively evaluate Skribble, to the way that you manage fear. I think that the management of fear, because your story, I think, um, is what a lot of people want to be, where they were doing something that, again, it's secure, it's comfortable, but it's not necessarily what they would find a lot of value in, something that they want to go do. And I worry a lot that, especially people that I like graduated with college, people I went to high school with, people that I get to know, that they're living a life that it works. But as I kind of talk to them about, like, hey, I just started this podcast as a hobby, I kind of tease out of them like, oh, they'll talk about, I have this idea, I want to go do that idea. I'm like, just go for it. But there's so much kind of in the way. And I guess what I'm hoping is that this story, for a lot of individuals, it doesn't matter how old, how young you are, what line of work you're in, there's always something else you can go do. I mean, prime example, my father, he was a remodeling contractor for 25 years. 2007 recession hits, and now he started a barbecue truck that is just as successful as any other restaurant out there. He's what he would have been, maybe high 40s, low 50s, and completely reinvented himself. So there's no, to me, what I've learned from you is that there's really no excuse to be afraid to reinvent yourself or to reapply yourself, especially if you're following a foundation that is reasonable, logical, to achieve the success that you want. So yeah, this has been, I really enjoyed this. A couple more things before we go, because I know I got a couple of questions that I typically end this with, but I have one more thing that I really want to start getting into with these folks that I interview, which is your routine, right? The way that you wake up every day, what, your day-to-day habits, that you believe help to perpetuate the success you're achieving. Because I'm a firm believer that, for me, if I don't wake up early every morning, and if I don't really start to, if I don't get that morning exercise in, whatever that is, and get the blood flowing, then I know I'm going to be more groggy for the day, which is going to lead to more opportunities to make mistakes. So if I wake up every morning at an early hour, get my workout in, I follow my diet plan for the day, I journal, I read, I do all these things, I know I give myself the highest chance for success. So for you, what is Nakisha's day to day, week to week? What is your routine? What are those habits that you kind of do religiously to ensure that you are at the top of your game?
One of the things that I do when I first wake up in the morning, I play what I call my happy song. So right now, it changes. Right now, it's Chris Brown, Go Crazy. So, I play that, and it just kind of puts me in like a good mood. And, I drink a cup of tea, and just kind of take time to, reflect on the day before, and just kind of run through a mental checklist in my head of the things that I have to do that day. then I take my shower, and while I'm in the shower, I'm kind of, thinking about things and again, going over my checklist. Um, I go throughout my day depending upon what that day might look like. It might be a day of strictly, writing. It might be a day of, meetings and writing. It might be a day of consultations and a little bit of writing. And, I'm just making sure that I'm allowing myself enough time in between meetings and writing and, consultations to, really just kind of take a breather, kind of reset and refocus so that the next client or the next person is getting my all in all, and I'm not carrying over the previous meeting or the previous consultation. I try to limit the number of meetings I take a week so that, I have enough time to focus on other tasks, because I don't want the whole week to be, just full of meetings, especially if I have other deadlines. Um, I also set aside me time. So at a certain point of the day, it's no phone, it's no clients, and it's just time for me to just watch a movie or, read a book or, listen to some music or just, write in a journal. And then, when I'm in bed at night, before I doze off, I just try to, remember that, I woke up. So because I woke up, it means that it's another day for me to serve a purpose. And it's another day for me to, do this thing that I've been set out to do, because, it's meant for me to be here. And, just again, those words of affirmations, speaking, positivity, speaking things into existence, and, trying not to get caught up in, negativity, trying not to get caught up in the world of social media, trying not to get caught up in, the bad things that are going on, especially, in 2020, it's easy for us to look around and, this year has been devastating to a lot of people, but just trying to, look at the light at the end of the tunnel. And just realize that, I'm truly blessed, and I'm blessed to be, able to have an opportunity to do something that I really enjoy doing. And I'm blessed to be able to, help individuals, carry out their missions and their purposes. So.
Oh yeah. I kind of, what I'm hearing a lot of is kind of how you describe what you do with, your work is you really value your time and how you use it, using it in ways that will benefit you, your soul, your mood, your being, right? Everything from that happy song in the morning. I love that. Just making sure you wake up right and end the day right. Waking up, getting yourself going, getting yourself ready to, at the end of the day, knowing, hey, it was a good day. I woke up today. I'm gonna, Lord willing, that you'll open your eyes up tomorrow and be able to have another shot at it. I think, valuing time and valuing the perspective you have with your time. I think those are really two important concepts that I'm hearing a lot of in what you're talking about.
And for me also, as I mentioned it, I have to always try to find the positive in something. So there could be 10 things that don't go right throughout the day, but I'll pick out that one thing that did, and to me, I had a good day. So that's how I get through the day. That's how I get through the week. And, making sure, Sundays are a time I spend with my parents, so I make sure that, I'm around them for dinner. I make sure there's a certain time of the week where, I'm checking in on friends, whether it's a text, a phone call. So that's it.
That's awesome. So what's next for Nakisha?
Back to my journal, plans for world domination, just figuring out how to keep expanding that market. Like I said, we're in 9 states, 1 country, but there are a lot more states to go and a lot more countries to go. So just finding a way to get Skribble over to other countries, finding a way to get Skribble into other states, because this wasn't just meant to be something for Wisconsin, this is meant to be something for the world.
No question. And I know working in nonprofit, not just Boys and Girls Clubs, getting to know nonprofits of all walks, that grant writing is something grant writing and just being able to provide that expertise for governance for nonprofits. I've met a lot of folks in a lot of different places that would find a lot of value in what you offer. So you're definitely onto something that, no question in my mind, if you've grown as fast as you have in the last 2 years, um, I'm very excited for you for what's to come. Just hearing your story and how it all began to the world domination so far and what's to come. This is going to be some really awesome stuff for you and your company and everyone else that's going to be along for the ride. Um, One of the last questions I always ask, because to me, there's this idea that um, means a lot. It means a lot to me, and so I want to kind of get an understanding from other people what, not necessarily what it means in total perspective to you, but the idea of legacy, because there's going to come a day where, we're not going to be here, and that there'll be a whole new world, after we're gone, long after we're gone. But with this time that you have to that moment that you're no longer here, there's a legacy I'm assuming you want to leave behind. So for you, what is that legacy that you want to leave behind for the world?
My legacy has changed. So it used to be having something that my kids would be able to obtain. And while, that may come in other areas, Skribble is not meant to be a family business because my kids have their own ideas as far as what they want to do professionally. Skribble is meant to, be a company, again, that's global, something that's going to help people. So, if down the line, somebody comes to me with an offer and buys Skribble, one of the things I want the people to remember about me is that, I built something and I did it with integrity. I did it without losing myself. I was honest, I was forthright, and, I helped the world.
That's awesome. Is there anything else before we end? This is what do you want to tell the people? This is that portion. What's on your heart? What's on your mind that you kind of want to leave with the listeners, everyone out there, whether that be about how to achieve success, their dreams, their goals, things that you want them to know about you. This is your time to shine here to end us off.
Two things. While Skribble to me was kind of an accident, there's a lot of people out there that have things that they want to do, but to them, they might not feel the timing is right. And there's no such thing as the perfect timing. There's no such thing as, waiting for the right time to jump into something. If you truly have something that you want to pursue, truly have something that you're passionate about, find a way to just make it happen. The worst thing you can do is live with if, what could have beens and should haves. At least if you do it and even if it doesn't work out, at least you can say that you tried. And that is, one of the things that no one can take away from you. The second thing, I told you this in our initial conversations, one of the biggest things that I've learned as being an entrepreneur is that, networking will open doors that degrees cannot. In this line of work that I'm doing, my clients don't necessarily care about the number of degrees I have because they're more concerned with the skill set that I have. And so, through networking, I've had a chance to, build relationships, make connections. And it's, part of networking that Skribble has grown that the way it has, not the degrees that I have. Degrees were helpful in corporate America, but networking has become much more useful in entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Nakisha. Like I said, when we first started talking, within minutes, I was just like, this story is amazing, and I would love to get this out to the world. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do that and to learn more about you from you, because there's plenty of notes that I made while we talked that I'm like, oh, I've never, not maybe that I've never thought of it this way, but it never really clicked in my head of how to handle my day, handle some of the thoughts I have around fear, handling myself and how I value time, and putting dollars to that time, whatever that might be. There's been a lot of really cool lessons that I personally can take away, and without question, I think there will be a lot of individuals that listen to this and can say, they resonate with your story. They resonate with this idea that they feel like, hey, there's something else I want to do. and that it's a leap of faith, but hey, just take it. Just go for it. So again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on, and I hope to have you on in the future again when Skribble dominates the world.
Thank you so much for having me. I truly enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap it up here.